Hey gang, it's me, Dr. Steve. I hope you're having a wonderful weekend, but I just had to comment on this Chinese spy balloon fiasco facing the Biden administration. You know, this administration seems utterly incapable of any measure of competence whatsoever in any area of governance, whether we're talking, think about it, unprecedented inflation, surging gas prices, a looming recession, baby formula shortages, remember those, supply chain interruptions, flight interruptions, a violent crime epidemic sweeping our nation's cities, defunding the police, woke school boards, insanity in the classrooms, global pandemics, mass lockdowns, unconstitutional vax mandates, and of course, Mar-a-Lago, right? Illegally stashing classified documents around his crackhead son. They can't even lie well anymore, gang. Their spokesperson, Karine Jean-Pierre, she literally melts. She literally folds every single day under the slightest bit of pressure from the pathetic legacy media. But all of Biden's ongoing blunders duly noted, I think the deliberate chaos at our southern border is the worst. That's because all other blunders can be rectified, right? Get rid of Biden, and we solve our economic problems. We solve the absurd wokeness in our nation's capital or in our schools. We resolve the gas prices and energy dependence issues. We solve the supply chain interruptions, the travel interruptions. All of those things can be resolved, but demographics can't, right? Demographics have a long-term impact that adversely affects our nation long after Biden is wheeled into the nursing home he so desperately belongs in. And as of the last 24 to 48 hours, the border crisis has reached a whole new height we never even imagined. Obviously, it's not just our southern border. We are now seeing a transgression of our airspace. I'm sure you all know by now, Chinese surveillance balloon was spotted. I believe it's around 66,000 feet in the air over the state of Montana originally, precisely above Malmstrom Air Force Base, where we just happened to have a stockpile of Minutemen III IBMs. We now know that the Biden administration has been well aware of these Chinese spy balloons for quite some time, for at least the last year, one report I read indicated. And we now know that the Biden administration knew about this particular Chinese balloon for about a week, since at least January 28th. That's being reported as of today. And they opted over the course of that week not to inform the American public. That is until a local Montana newspaper, the Billings Gazette, published a photo of the balloon on Thursday. Thank God for good, wholesome local media. And so the Biden administration had to admit that, yes, indeed, this is a Chinese surveillance balloon. And of course, the Chinese government is claiming all it is a weather balloon, nothing more, just looking at environmental patterns and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, right. But there's something about this balloon that is actually quite astonishing. And I believe it was the Western Journal that reported this first. But this isn't any ordinary surveillance balloon. As you know, it has an unusual level of accuracy and maneuverability that the government, our government, did not seem very keen on elaborating on. The Pentagon's press secretary, Air Force Brigadier General Patrick Ryder, he was asked about this maneuverability on Friday, and he was asked directly by reporters whether the Chinese government is directly controlling the movement of this balloon, or is it just floating via the airstream? And the spokesperson answered saying, I'm not going to get into any specific intelligence on the matter. We know this is a Chinese balloon, and yes, it does have the ability to maneuver, and I'm going to leave it at that. Now, that's gigantic. If you think it through, we have a foreign spy balloon invading our airspace that is actively being controlled as we speak, controlled and directed by the Chinese government. And thus far, the Biden administration has literally done nothing about it, other than do their darndest to hide it from the American public. And clearly, they weren't even competent enough to do that. So here we are with a Biden administration that's not only daily demonstrating willful incompetence at our southern border, they are now taking that incompetence to new heights, a comparable incompetence with a Chinese government-operated spy balloon 60,000 feet in the air. Oh, and by the way, we found another one. I think you may have heard this, right? Flying over Latin America. So what's happening here, gang? What's really going on? Well, I mean, I watched Tucker and his take on it the other night. And Tucker's arguing that Biden's inaction is just an extension of the way China has bought off Biden. Remember, the email on Hunter's laptop that mentions the big guy getting his 10%, right? That had to do with money coming from the now defunct Chinese energy company known as CEFC. So Tucker just sees what we're seeing here as an extension of Biden having been irreparably compromised by the Chinese government. And I think that's true. But I actually think what's happening here is symptomatic of something much deeper going on. Because if you think it through, being compromised by the Chinese government doesn't necessarily have anything that I could fathom or I could discern. It doesn't have anything to do with Biden's deliberate incompetence at the southern border. And that's where I think something deeper is going on here, where these two things, the Chinese balloon and the southern border, connect. We are seeing an erosion of any sense of national loyalty within the modern left. The modern ideological left today, by and large, sees the symbols of group loyalty such as nationalism and border security and economic protectionism and traditional religion and the like as antiquated, old-fashioned, unenlightened, knuckle-dragging. We read over and over again in rags like the New York Times, Washington Post, editorials celebrating the virtues of open borders, the virtues of open societies. They're all the hallmarks of a globalist utopia that is yet to come. The problem here, of course, is that scholars have noted how the more we open up our borders, the more social distrust and discord is fostered. So, for example, in both 2016, 2020, the counties that were most likely to vote for Trump were counties that had experienced the most radical and dramatic demographic change due to unfettered immigration. Open borders leads inevitably, we saw this particularly in Europe via 2015, it leads inevitably to destabilize societies such that this globalist utopia simply never emerges. In fact, it's the opposite. The more open a nation's borders, the more its citizens demand we close them. And so in the end, while this is clearly maddening to say the least in terms of Biden's bought and paid for incompetence with regard to China, it's all part of a process that does inevitably implode in on itself. Eventually, we are going to hit what we call a tipping point, where the vast majority of the population sides with the most vocal minority. Usually that's about 20% of the population, according to tipping point studies. All you need is about 20% to stand up and say, that's it. They demand that our borders be closed and secure, and because the rest will come and join them, they'll eventually rise to power to effect such an outcome. Until then, we'll continue to witness the Democrat-encouraged violation of our national sovereignty, both on the ground and 66,000 feet above. Crazy. As always, make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button, and you will definitely want to check out my latest video. Gang, you're going to love this. It was Jimmy Kimmel actively trying to mock Mike Lindell, and you won't believe what happened next. You definitely want to check it out, so make sure to click on that link, and I'll see you over there. God bless.